I am Madison Timmons.
I'm Chris Susie.
And we're paranormal specialists who live in the most haunted city on earth, Savannah, Georgia. Every day is Halloween in our line of work, so join us as we spin true tales of haunts, murders, and disturbing Savannah history. I'm Madison.
I'm Chris.
And welcome to the most haunted city on earth.
Boom.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the most haunted city on earth. My name is Madison Timmons.
I'm Chris Susie.
And I'm JT Timmons.
And y'all are missing out if you're not a para junkie, because we have been feral this morning.
Feral.
We just had 30 minutes of some of the most interesting conversation.
Yeah.
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 Not
It's been
paranormal
insane.
related.
No, more true crime related.
More true crime related.
Yeah, we're talking eating placentas.
We're talking
a lot of cannibalism.
There was a lot of cannibalism.
A lot of
talk. Yeah,
cannibalism.
Well,
talk.
it came up because I don't even know where we started with that, because we started with
So we were talking about dragons and
Yes.
how people always say that we don't see dragon bones or anything like that.
Yeah.
And I was like, I would imagine that because of the way humans are, I could see us grinding any dragon bones we found into a elixir or a paste, and then selling it as this is dragon juice, and things of that nature. Because there was a time, and when I say that, there was a time when people would grind mummies into powder and then serve them in teas and stuff. This was in the late 1900s, early 20th century. This was not like ancient tradition. This was, a relatively modern society saying, I think that would be wonderful. I think it would give me some kind of power. It's like, are you sure you're not just drinking old bones?
they're like, no, immortality.
Right, exactly. They
Yes.
thought that it would cause youth and things like that. And I think they turned them into pastes and creams that they put on their faces. And I was like, that's a human being. That's a human being you're putting on your face. And that devolved into eating placenta, which then, of course, naturally went into true crime.
Yeah. Naturally.
Yeah, all roads lead to true crime.
It do.
Yes.
So if you like that type of feralness, you should become a para junkie.
That's true.
Because we live stream some of these recordings.
And you too
Yeah.
can be scarred for life.
At
And
what
we were
time is it?
talking-
10 o'clock in the morning. It's like-
And we were talking about the UGA murder. I had no idea about it
Yeah.
until
Oh, yeah.
literally just now,
no, it
until Elle
literally
brought it
just
up.
happened.
Yes.
So
Wow. That's wild.
It is ongoing.
Yeah. Elle said, for y'all that don't know, Elle goes to UGA. She's a para junkie. She said she went to UGA but is now at Augusta State for nursing. Lake Herrick is on campus. Correction, Brumby Hall happened the night before the murder.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
interesting.
Fascinating.
Yeah, that
So-
is from what I heard.
The night
she
before
was
the
in-
murder or the night before the discovery of the murder?
So I think they found her
I don't
the
know.
day
Elle-
of.
Elle heard you,
because-
so yeah.
Yeah, because they, it was her friend who
Yeah.
called and was like, "Hey, my friend hasn't come back from jogging at
Sure.
Lake Herrick. That's weird, not normal."
So just for people listening, what exactly happened?
So basically, a lot of this is still very up in the air, just because UGA is still investigating everything. But basically, there was a girl who's not a UGA student. She's an Augusta State student, but I don't know.
Former
Yeah,
UGA student, now
Exactly.
Augusta nursing student.
Yes.
So obviously has ties and friends on the campus.
Right.
Yeah.
And so she must have either been staying with a friend, or she might be a roommate there, or whatever it be. She went jogging out at Lake Herrick, which is, there's a park very on campus, like Elle said. And it has a big walking trail. If you look up photos of it, it literally is just perfect place to go take a jog at the woods with a nice paved path. And so she apparently went jogging, and she wasn't back for a really long time. And so her friend got concerned. And so the friend called UGA campus police and was like, "Hey, my friend went jogging. She's not back. I'm concerned about her. Can you go at least take a look, see if she's okay?" Like a wellness check. And so they went out to Lake Herrick, and they immediately did a search of the area, and they did find her. She was dead upon arrival, basically. When they found her, she was not breathing, all that. And she had violent wounds showing some type of struggle. So immediately now they are taking that as a homicide case and things like that. That is about as far as UGA police have released.
As of this moment.
As of this moment,
Yeah.
They did a whole press conference. They did say the other incident, which was a student committed suicide in Branby Hall, which is a dormitory at UGA.
And apparently the
night before. And so
that's a dark 24 hours.
it is. And the police chief of UGA police said that it is not related at all.
Yeah.
But there are some people. Now, this is complete speculation. There is no legitimate evidence of this, but there was a case with a girl who was killed while jogging in Maryland a couple months ago, and apparently the case feels very similar to this case.
Sure.
And so,
Yeah, that's what I was like. There's the pit of your stomach sensation of a serial killer notion, because it seems like a crime of opportunity, but the specifics of it seem like somebody was waiting to do, because you're in a quasi-public
right.
spot. You know, the opportunities are thin.
Yeah.
So, you know, and it is not an uncommon thing and it sucks to have to say, you know, running alone is dangerous.
Right.
You know, it sucks that is a phrase that we live with in today's society is a woman shouldn't run alone. I mean,
In a
how
park.
horrifying.
Yeah.
That is a notion, but I do actually remember the Maryland case now, and I'm like, oh, of course, you know it and there's no reason to connect them, but the fact that story and it's not an uncommon story,
Right.
Woman running, being attacked.
So Elle basically said that from what she heard, because she was in a sorority at UGA at some point recently, the call and discovery happened within a few hours of each other.
Wow.
As far as she knows, in all caps, as far as I know, she is an Augusta State student and has some ties with UGA and a UGA sorority. She went jogging and wasn't back, and her friend got concerned and called for a wellness check. They found her murdered with violent wounds in a Lake Herrick park very soon after. The suicide happened the night before in Brumby Hall. Again, this is what I have heard from peers and news from the university. What's scary is that she was at Lake Herrick, when she was at Lake Herrick, was a super popular time.
Right.
Like, people are always out there, and it's hard to be completely alone. The parking lot there is used for student parking, so my roommates couldn't get to their cars.
Oh.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that's how close
Yeah.
you were to it all.
Yeah.
Be careful out there.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Do not travel alone if you don't have to. And anyone want to say
Just,
it out loud again, but arm yourself.
Yeah. Constitutional carry here in good old state of Georgia.
Well,
Utilize
and there's
it.
a wide variety of things that you can arm yourself with. You know, I just recently saw that they make a high velocity pellet pistol that shoots out mace.
Oh, wow.
Interesting.
And it looks kind of like an oversized Glock, so it's intimidating to look at.
Yeah.
And you can fire it rapidly and dispense it, and it's very debilitating. So consider that. You know, tasers, guns, even a knife. You know, can be the difference in instances
In
like
a
this.
situation like that, yeah.
And again, I hate that that's the kind of society we live in, where we're like,
I know.
if you're going to be alone, you know, arm yourself. But
Yeah, it's a bit of a ways from UGA campus, but something I wanted to bring up just because we're talking about it is Precision Firearms is a gun store here in Savannah, and they have a non-lethal section. So if you don't want to
most
do
firearm
anything,
stores do.
yeah,
You know, there's a lot of interesting non-lethal solutions. There's one that it terrifies me to think of, but it's a honey pepper spray. And the reason why it scares me is it glues your eyes shut.
Yeah.
So like if it makes contact with the eyes, it actually glues them shut, but it glues them shut with pepper spray. So you've got pepper spray in your eyes and you can't open them. That is a nightmarish combination. So yeah, by all means, if you're out there and just know that self-defense is important and can be effective.
So we'll end here because we have some Kentucky cryptids to talk about.
Oh, that's right.
but no, it's okay. It's honestly, real important thing to be talking about on a platform. So Elle went on to say they were checking plates and IDs before people could leave. It was chaos. Again, I am just a student, and this is information I've gathered as a student from my peers. And then Wanderlust Magic said, I recommend Saber Gel Mace.
Oh, yeah.
You can use confidently outside without the risk of it blowing back in your face. And then Elle said, we had a slumber party with my friends because we are all spooked. Well, you stay safe
Absolutely.
out there, Elle.
And this kind of crime seems like one that is repeatable.
Right.
You might be dealing with,
a
psychotic
offender.
break.
Yeah.
That only gets worse if the person isn't caught. So
absolutely. Honestly, this we've been talking about it already for 12 minutes, and so it's like I think it's interesting bringing this into the paranormal. Madison, what did we watch last night?
We watched a documentary, and it was what was it about?
It was the Charleston murder.
Yes.
So we were watching a true crime doc about the Charleston
College, or the College of Charleston.
The College of Charleston. Yeah.
Yes, the College of Charleston murder of Patrick Moffley.
Yeah,
Moffley. And it's interesting because I thought about doing an episode. I don't think a paranormal podcast has ever done this, and I feel like we could probably do it right now, just sharing our opinions and everything, and then do Kentucky Cryptids next. But I thought it'd be really interesting to talk about the aspect of going to a murder. How long, I guess, when is it respectful to go to a murder?
That's an excellent question, actually.
And talk, because I was like, wow, I would love to go and just like do like an Estes method near the murder. But then I'm like, wait, that happened in 2016. When is it disrespectful? Like how long is long enough to go and see if there's any type of residual haunting or any type of haunting from a brutal murder like what happened to Patrick Moffley? Obviously, it would be extremely disrespectful to be doing that to, like at the UGA thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, so I think it's interesting because I think it really varies where you are. If we're just talking about the U.S. in general. Yeah. Because I have not lived anywhere else, any other country. And so I don't know how exactly those types of places would react in certain ways. And I can imagine probably not well. But specifically in the U.S., the South, I think, is way more intense. Yeah. About recent deaths, especially like places here in Savannah, in Charleston, because I used to tell a story that happened in '94 on our ghost tour, which in the scheme of things, that's a long time. That it was 20 years ago, and so it's in the scheme of things, it should have been kind of a like, oh, this makes sense, but sometimes people are like, oh, that's too recent.
Yeah. And what's even stranger is because usually with a ghost story, you're talking about an event that occurred that you can kind of link to an event. Right. Like somebody had an event and you're like, oh, what happened in that place? A terrible murder or terrible death happened in that place. But the closer in time you are, the more sensitive people are about it.
Right. Yeah.
They're like, oh gosh, that family's still around. Those people are still around. And we've even on this podcast, I think we even scrapped an episode at one point because as we were talking about it, we realized that there were too many people linked to the tragedy, and we were like, maybe we shouldn't, publish this because there were enough people, and it was simply because. It's respectful to the people who are alive not to capitalize on a tragedy. However, as almost anybody in the paranormal field knows, the closer to the tragedy you are, the more vibrant those impressions are, the more potent the supernatural activity could be, and perhaps in those instances, the more likely you are to get information that might help you solve and or discover something.
Right.
So it does kind of it has that double-edged sword because this is the very definition of pseudoscience. It's the very definition of, contentious information. Like if you go out and you're like, a ghost told me this fact, it becomes very difficult for people to accept that or even regard it as tactful or tasteful, because it does seem like you're just trying to capitalize on a tragedy.
On a tragedy.
Right.
So it's funny because I think that people don't spend any time talking about the morality of ghost hunting.
Yeah.
Because there is something to the fact that these are real people. These are, real tragedies. And when you indulge in the activity of looking for a ghost, you're also stirring up the tragedy. You're making the tragedy replay itself. Which is even like for documentary filmmakers or people who are writing articles about it.
Right.
You're picking at scabs that have not fully healed. You're reopening those wounds. So I think that it is kind of an important question to ask. It's like, at what point do you say, you know what, this is a recipe for paranormal activity, but the people involved are trying to wrestle with it. However, we have heard many times that family members get great peace and comfort.
They do.
From messages from beyond. So now there's another layer.
Yeah.
Now there's a whole other layer where you're going.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
What do we do? Because there might be an obligation to pass along a message, to be the representation or the representative of the dead. Yeah, that's a rabbit hole to go down.
I mean, we have 20, 30 minutes. Let's do it.
Well,
I think it's worth it.
I think so too.
Especially now.
Well, I think so too. And I think
because we could be packing up the car to go to UGA right now.
Exactly.
We'll help the police find the killer, but that's poor taste.
That is poor taste.
It depends on. I find it really depends on who is involved, like Chris said, because some families are very open and receptive to it. And I don't know Patrick Moffley's family, but after watching that documentary, and they literally had a party at his funeral, like people were saying, this is better than some weddings I've been to. So they feel to me like the types that would be into,
they would embrace it.
They would embrace at least, what can you find?
The attempt,
right?
Because there's goodwill to be had in the attempt at getting to the bottom of something,
right? And but some people are very closed off to that concept. But at the same time, you have a fine line when people are grieving.
Oh yes, absolutely. And grieving is so unpredictable.
It is. It's so unpredictable. And as somebody who sees spirits, I've dealt with this a lot in my life of people being like, can you tell me something about my past loved one? And I'm like, that is not at my will.
Yeah.
I had a woman one time come onto the trolley because she found us on TikTok, and she came onto my tour because she wanted to see if I could contact her dead husband who had just passed 2 weeks before.
Wow. Oof.
And I was like, I felt so horrible because one, I'm out on the job and I'm trying to do my job. But I'm like, I get messages from spirits sometimes, but that is not because I am actively searching for them. I am not the person that is going to try to cross your loved one over. And I'm like, but at the same time, and what I told her is sometimes spirits don't want to be contacted, and you got to let them go through their process. And maybe one day they'll come and, visit you or do whatever, and check in on you, or you'll see signs of their presence around you, or they'll send you little messages and things like that. But you can't force a spirit to come back just because you're grieving, unfortunately.
Well, and that's another thing to really consider, and I don't think people do. For all the grief we feel, they're grieving too.
Right.
Yep.
They lost everything too. They lost their loved ones. They lost, their life. They lost all these things. And we very rarely take time to consider what that process might be. And, you take the 5 stages of grief, apply it to a ghost. Think about a ghost going through denial, going through bargaining, going through these things, and then add on to it us prodding it for information or trying to extract something from it while it is dealing with the inescapable loss of everything. You don't just lose, the figure, but you lose all things, the world at large, every smell, every sight, every sound, every taste, everything that you've built your persona and your life around are no longer accessible to you. And that becomes an overwhelming burden. And some spirits are going to be sulky. Some spirits are going to be dealing with it for a long time. And many people believe that the unfinished business that we talk about when a spirit dies, that unfinished business can be that grieving period, that mourning period. And if they get hung up on any of those stages, and I will go ahead and say the stages are just notions, that they're not the regulation of grief. There's no such thing.
Right.
But I use the stages of grief because it's a good way to say, what you feel is natural.
Yes.
And you can be in denial forever. That could be the chief and principal, a stage of grief that you're at. And so when people talk about the 5 stages of grief, it's a little bit of nonsense because there's no prescription to grief. There's no there's no, I checked that off my list, I'm moving on. They're interchangeable. They come and go. And you can get to acceptance, but then find yourself right back at bargaining. It's not that way. It's not like once I go through the 5 stages of grief, I'll be fine. But saying that, spirits might linger with huge resentments at dying, just huge resentments at not being alive anymore. And that puts them in a place where they are not going to be communicating anything but that regret. Yeah. They're only going to have that as their emotional center. And that makes them seem malignant, and that makes them seem angry. Oh, this is an angry spirit. It's like, well, what do you think it's angry at? It might just be angry that it died. And that's fine. That's an acceptable thing. Anger is a reasonable reaction to something being taken from you, especially your life or the life of someone you love.
So that spirit would want to potentially communicate if it is angry.
Possibly.
Yes, but what it communicates might not be the message of the spirit as much as it is the frustration. The voice of its frustration. So it comes across as, oh, this spirit is evil because it's saying get out. It's saying imagine going to somebody whose loved one died and them saying, go away. Yeah. And we're like, we understand. Yeah. And then we go to a place and the ghost is like, go away. It's like, it's evil. It's a demon. Let's get rid of it. Get the crosses out. Throw the holy water. When in fact, it's just like, I had a life. Right. And it's gone. And I'm upset about it. So, we make a lot of determinations about spirits' motivations, but we don't take any time or rarely take time to think, if this was a human being alive and they were saying these things or doing these things, we would assume that it was because they were hurt or hurting, that they were going through something. We would have all these answers for what could possibly going on with them. But when it's a spirit and they say something that's negative, even something like, I'll kill you, you're immediately like, well, that's a demonic force or that's an evil force. It's like, are you sure? Or could it be this spirit is going through something emotionally that we can't comprehend?
Well, and interestingly, there was a study done recently where they use hypnosis to try to determine some of the aspects of what the process is after you die.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if you saw that.
I did see that.
Yeah, it's very fascinating. And basically, they discuss that there is a whole process, and what you believe in this lifetime determines how this goes for you. So they were saying that some people who believe that when you die, it's just you go into nothingness, that's exactly what happens to you. But if you don't believe that, then it starts to maneuver a different path. But some of the consensus is that when you die, you don't immediately see the white light. You go through this liminal phase. And apparently a lot of them, attend their own funerals. Like, it's very common for people to attend their own funerals, which is interesting. And makes you wonder if, like, you shouldn't do more celebrations of life versus intense mourning, so that if in the case that your loved one is there, that it's like, oh, they're all so happy and had such a good time with me, and like they're celebrating my life,
their life.
Yeah. How wonderful is that? So a lot of people attend their own funerals, and they apparently there is this space where it's like they described it as a library, where you go into this library for different reasons, in different phases after you pass. But it's like a library with all these books, and you can pull each book and revisit.
It's the classic life flashing before your eyes.
Exactly. And you can go and you can look at all of these memories that you had before eventually where the white light is, and eventually you can go over there, but some people choose never to go through it.
Mm-hmm. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Right. Because there's more to learn as this person. Because one of the most terrifying notions that I ever came across was the notion that there's a point at which you no longer get to keep any of the memories. Mm-hmm. You no longer get to have any of the identity you had. When you go through the light, you are no longer who you are. You are the soul. You are the soul.
Yeah.
And from there you can actually choose to come back.
Right.
And from there, so that's why there are those rare instances where people have memories of their past lives. It's a fluke, because technically we're not supposed to remember anything. We're not supposed to have any attachments to the world as we know it. Once you go through the white light, you're basically being factory reset.
Yep.
It's so that we don't get burdened by generations and generations and generations of hardship
lessons,
or lessons or things like that, because we're always trying to learn the thing we didn't learn. Right. And so that's what supposedly the library, and sometimes people call it a court, where you're kind of like defending your life, where you're going on and you're being judged on the things that you did, so that you'll have an understanding of where your shortcomings were and where the things that went wrong in your life were. And then you're afforded an opportunity. And some people believe that you get to plan your life before you come back. And these are all wonderful things. And this study, they started with hypnotizing people who had near-death experiences, and that was like the central point. But I think they started to expand out and just started hypnotizing, because there's a lot of past life regression hypnotherapy.
Yes,
that's just endlessly fascinating.
It is. It's super fascinating, and I just thought it was so interesting because some people were saying exactly what Chris was saying, which was they can go through and see, like, this was the lessons I learned. This is what I need to learn to become my fully evolved soul, or whatever it be. So I don't have to keep going back.
Right, exactly.
And so, because if you look at reincarnation in like every culture, and reincarnation has always been, I know a lot of people probably don't feel the same sentiment, but in many, many different transcripts of most common world religions, reincarnation does come up at some point.
Absolutely.
Which is fascinating that it was brought up in these studies, because essentially you're only reincarnating until you're a fully evolved soul, which is where the concept of new souls and old souls come from.
Right. When
you meet somebody who's 5 years old and they just seem so wise, and it's like, how are you this wise and you're 5 years old? How do you know all these things? A lot of times it's because they're considered old souls. They've been through so many life cycles at this point, and they've learned so many of their lessons. They can come back in this life and not have to learn as many, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you see it a lot with children, because they're so people gave me so much crap for this when I called the gray baby fresh, but when you're a fresh ghost, when you're a fresh baby,
right?
But like when you're fresh, it's like you still see the remnants of it. But yeah, like people supposedly were able to pick their parents. Like you're given like this laundry list of all these people that are expecting a child, and it's like, I'm going to go with them, and I'm going to live this life, and I'm going to learn these lessons, and I'm going to go through these hardships, and this is what I'm choosing to do.
My own child, Sushi, when they were very young, like between 2 and 3, talked about the in-between time and talked about how we were connected. how they were my father in the last time around, and how we agreed that I would be the father this time. And they said it was a train station that we were in. That we waited in a train station, and I took the train back to Earth first. And then they said, "You made me wait a long time." I was 32 when they were born, and they were like, "I was in that station for a long time. I was supposed to be earlier, but you made me wait a long time." And I asked if they knew their mother before, and they said no.
Oh, interesting.
This was the first time I encountered
the soul contract thing.
Yeah. And I was like, that's interesting. And I was like, how, at what point was this, where are we developing these relationships? But it was interesting because I think there is, and you could kind of find these connective and non-connective people, and how the quote unquote old souls or souls that kind of know each other, because as near as I can tell, me and Sushi went back centuries.
Yep.
I think in one conversation, and these conversations, when they ended. There was no memory of them. Like I asked again when they were 6, and they had no recollection of past lives. Yeah, I mean, they told me they were a farmer. They got hit by a train on a tractor because their truck broke down. And this is a story that she's telling me when they're like 2.
Whoa.
And it was like, it started with, "Do you remember when my teeth fell out?" And we're like, "Oh no, your teeth are just coming in." And no, I was an old man and my teeth fell out. I was really sad.
Whoa.
And that led to this conversation of being a farmer, and I was the son at that time, and that the truck broke down. They took the tractor into town, and it was too slow to get over the train tracks, and they got hit, and all of that was like, I don't know where you're getting that.
Right.
I can't even fathom how you piece together that story at your age.
Right.
I'm like, what media input could possibly have given you that narrative?
Right.
So yeah, I find
super
it interesting.
It is. Well, and on the same like reincarnation front, there was another interesting theory that came about with if you've been on TikTok at all in 2023 at least, there was a time where these people were asking their boyfriends or their husbands or just cis men in general, how often do you think about the Roman Empire? How often do you think about the Roman Empire? And I want to know, all of you, how many times do you think about the Roman Empire?
Okay. So real fast.
Yes.
All right. So Natalie said, this is fascinating. I lost my dad in 2018. He was very active with my girls. One was 18 months old, and the other was 4 years old when he passed, and both reported seeing him all the time. I truly believe he was letting us, the adults, know he was okay through them being young and the veil is thinner, and him being close to his passing. Do I think he would communicate now? I don't think so. I think he was at peace with his passing. He would also communicate through music. I've debated in writing in ghost mail because it didn't feel like a ghost mail type. But yeah, I think that's really,
out.
Yeah, no,
right? We'd love to read it.
Yeah,
and
for
it is
sure.
absolutely a ghost.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, especially because communication through music is something that we've gotten ghost mails about before. That's something
that's super common. And
keep in mind that we talk about communication like an active communication, but it's also about just connectiveness.
Right.
If that connection is still there, then you're drawing examples to your life that remind you or reinforce the love and the feelings and the sensations.
And that brings us back to the idea of like how long passing is too long, or
because we actually have that notion,
it's variable.
Almost immediately we have that variation that a spirit is more vibrant the closer to the event of their death.
Yes.
Right.
And that is something universally believed.
Yes.
So much so that cultures have all kinds of rules around funerals. Cover the mirrors.
Because they're in that liminal space.
Because they're in the liminal space. Because in that time right after death, before you're deciding whether to go on or stay, you could conceivably be lured to stay by all of the people who are pulling and tugging upon your spirit to be present. That notion, that idea of not letting go of them could conceivably be an anchor point. So there's all kinds of reasons to have that conversation, that discussion. You know, do we communicate with them at this point? And in that communication, how much damage are we doing to their travel? You know, if they're in the library, the light is there and they're like, well, it's time to go. And somebody's like, no, please, please.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and your obligations, your sensations, your feelings, your love might draw you back and away from the light. And that might not be necessarily the best thing for you.
Right.
So as moving forward and kind of going back to what we started the episode about with the whole UGA very unfortunate murder, you know, as respectful people in search of paranormal answers and not wanting to monetize it, what are we so afraid of? Exactly. Why wouldn't we go try to communicate and try to get answers?
It's not the spirits, it's the people.
It's the human.
It's the living.
It's the living.
It's the living.
So we're afraid of the people that think that that's ridiculous or
because it is disrespectful.
It is.
At the moment that you disregard people's feelings, you're being disrespectful. Even if you have very good reasoning. Like, it would be a different story if a voice was saying, you know, come to me. I have information. Then you have an obligation to follow those clues. But if you go searching it out, if you're seeking it out, then what you're really doing is you're sort of crossing a norm,
right,
of society.
Right.
You know, you're prying into somebody's personal tragedy, looking for something, and that what you're looking for, unfortunately, even if you have the best notions in mind, is personally greedy. You know, it's selfish. It's a selfish thing that I'm going to contact this spirit.
That's an interesting,
you know, because in the end, a lot of ghost hunting is selfish. And that's the danger of a lot of ghost hunting. I'm not saying that all ghost hunting, but I'm saying a lot of it is selfish. It is people trying to validate their position and belief in the world. And they're using a ghost hunt to provide them with enough evidence to prove that their theory and their thoughts are correct. And you usually can tell those people because of how violent they get when you oppose them, or how angry they get when you offer a different explanation, because they're not interested in learning. They're interested in proving. Right. They're interested in backing up something. And 9 times out of 10, what happened is this person had an unexplainable thing happen to them, and now they need to prove that it's real so that they don't feel insane or that they don't feel tricked. That's the big one, is a lot of people are afraid of being fools. Like, something happens and they're like, I saw a ghost. I'm not a fool. I wasn't fooled. So I'm going to go out and I'm going to prove that I'm no fool. And in that notion, they become aggressive about it, and you can see it. You can see the difference between people who are just trying to learn about the universe and about spirituality and about the paranormal altogether, and people who have a bone to pick with anybody who dared fool them or, you know, try to fool them.
Well, or they switch to the opposite side and they become such a staunch skeptic.
Right. That's like, the other, the same, the other side of the same coin.
Like, I had a man come on my tour. He was a crotchety old man, very, very staunch skeptic.
Crotchety.
But I sometimes, you know, when people are being a little nervous on the tour and stuff at the beginning while we're waiting for everybody, I'll ask, like, does anybody not believe in ghosts, you know? And so he goes, I don't believe in ghosts. I'm only here because my wife likes it. And I'm like, you go. And I was like, okay. And I'm like, is it because you never experienced one, or is it because you experienced one and you don't know how to feel about
challenged your reality, right?
And he goes, well, I lived in supposedly a haunted house. My mother got dragged across the living room floor, but I think she was just mentally ill. And I was like, okay, but you had all these experiences that would, people don't just levitate and get dragged across the floor.
That's not madness.
That's not madness. And so it's like, I feel like I've met so many of him in life.
That is absolutely true. Is the other side of that coin is that the only way to continue living the way you were before the event, or in the world that you wish to live in, is to become such a denying to use that denial and that skepticism and become so ingrained in the facts that you overlook the experiential realm, that the idea of being a human being is about experiencing what's around us. We get to a point where something has to be so concrete that there is no room for ghosts or aliens or anything out of your immediate realm.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and going back to like what you were saying, Jay, is like, why do you fear the living with these things? Is because you don't know what who those family members are.
Sure. Yeah.
You could have that crotchety old man on the trolley, and it's his daughter who was killed.
You're right.
And imagine
100%.
if that crotchety old man.
Yeah, you
was
show up
there.
with a message from their dead child.
He's gonna lose his mind.
Yeah.
He's going to actually throw a chair at you, probably. It's like.
Yeah.
Right. And it's such a difficult proposition because it's not our place to change people's beliefs.
Right.
It's not our place to insert ourselves in their lives and say, you're wrong for not believing X, Y, and Z.
Right.
And here's what I have about the subject. That's such a losing battle.
Right.
Yeah.
It's because I have no interest, none, in changing people's minds. I do not want to take non-believers and turn them into believers, and I certainly want to take believers and turn them into non-believers. That is not my pursuit.
Right.
My pursuit is very personal. It is very much me, and that I share it is simply because I believe that there are people who are on the same journey as me. I'm not trying to recruit people to this journey. I'm trying to be in the community of people who are doing the same thing. And there are times when we will encounter people who are against it, and they will join the community, and that's great. And there are times when there are people who are in the community and will want to leave it, and that's great too, because people are finding the things that they're willing to invest their energy and their belief and their time into and their thought into. And at the end of the day, what we invest in is what pays us back at the end.
Yeah.
And if you're going to invest in a real solid world that doesn't have room for those things, then that real solid world will pay you back what you invest.
Yep. Yep.
But of course, you risk losing a lot, because when that crashes, that suddenly became a very stock market analogy. But when the reality that you've invested so much into crashes, that's when you go into a deficit. That's when you lose.
Sure.
And that goes for either way. If you're all in on the paranormal and something comes crashing down, some reality bomb hits, and you no longer have that to go on, then all that you invested becomes a point of resentment and a point of loss.
Yeah.
So I think that there's a lot to navigating the idea that a lot of what we do should not be considered as something we do outside of our own structure. So going to a crime scene, going to these places, we have to remember that there's a lot of people tied into that moment. And what we're doing might be encroaching on what they're trying to
accomplish.
I can't get a thought out of my mind that after a murder of any type, that there could be a haunting that hasn't gone to that light. That's like, I want to say something so bad and no one can hear me.
Well, they will find a way, though.
Well, that's just it.
the thing.
I think that's an excellent point. Is we talk about this a lot, showing up as a bird,
Yes.
showing up as something familiar. There are ways of doing it, but kind of crashing into someone's reality, because that's another thing. If a spirit is like, I need to get through to this person, and that person's resistant, when they come through, it's going to be a nightmare.
Right.
It's going to be the worst thing that ever happened to them, because that spirit's trying and screaming and shouting. And imagine you're sitting at home and all of a sudden you hear a dead family member screaming at you. There's a lot to be said about the fact that we always give ghosts a lot of credit. Like they have great knowledge. They don't.
They know
They
what
don't.
they're allowed to know.
They know what they know. Yeah. And even in the idea of going to the library and seeing their lives, they may get a deeper and more advanced interpretation of their existence, but that doesn't give them the knowledge of everything.
Sure.
And they're also people. So they're ruled by all kinds of emotions and all kinds of, intricate motivations that are easy to misinterpret and easy to sell as malevolent or peaceful or graceful. Very likely the spirit could be just like, it's like, I feel a peaceful spirit here.
Yeah.
Well, and think about the Greenbrier ghosts that we talked about a long time ago when JT and I went to West Virginia. The Greenbrier ghost literally helped solve her murder because she came through to her mother.
You're right. You're right.
There is a time and a place sometimes, I think. And this is why I tell people I'm not going to actively seek out your loved ones. You know? Like in theory, could I? Probably.
Possibly.
But if they want to talk to me, they will.
Right.
And
that's another thing is don't encroach on their journey.
Right.
Don't pull them off the path that they're going on. If their path is trying to communicate, they'll find a way. And if you're in the way, you may become the carrier of the message.
Exactly.
But it's a strange arrangement when you think about it, because I think the way that the world is structured, when we pass that liminal space that we're talking about, that in-between space is about setting things in order. And because humans are generally messy, setting things in order can take a long time.
Yeah.
And there might be a lot of resistance to it.
So, running out of time for this episode, but I think it's been a great one.
Yeah,
I think it's an important one for sure. And Elle sent an update that it has been officially ruled a homicide. And so that's the update. And then
when is this in distance? When does this? When are people listening to this? When does this drop?
Tomorrow.
Okay.
So 12 a.m.
It would have been 2 days ago
Yes.
that all of this had occurred for everyone listening.
Yeah,
Just so you know,
absolutely.
if you're listening to this on the day that it dropped, we are broadcasting on February the 23rd.
Yes.
So when you're listening to this, we're going to be saying things like yesterday and the day before, but we're recording on Friday the 23rd.
Yes.
And so you might actually have a lot more information by the time you listen to this.
Yeah, it's true.
So
It's true.
I just want you to know that we are delivering information that we have.
Yeah, and there's a lot of people following this case,
Yes.
so you could honestly you'll find.
Well, and I
information
had
as
that pit in my stomach fear that it may not be the last. And what a terrible thing to say. I'm not in any way trying to gloom and doom it. It's just that sensation. It's like, that's
It feels
because
off.
it's such an act of blatant
Yes,
and brazen.
yes, it's very brazen. Yeah. So if you guys are interested in things like that, I can give you a true crime moment, if you will. I know some of you are not as true crime focused, which we've discussed.
Well, and there's a lot of crossover with paranormal and true crime.
Yeah.
And, we might want to think about finding stories that bridge that gap, because it's an interesting subject.
It is.
Because it generally is about something that happened that was so significantly, violent or disruptive, that the paranormal question should come into play.
Exactly. So, but yes, thank you guys so much for listening to today's episodes. And let me know in the comments how many times you think about the Roman Empire, because I'm fascinated.
Megan tried to get me on that, and I had to answer that probably a few times a week.
That's what my sister's boyfriend said.
Which is weird, because I had to clarify that I don't think of the Roman Empire. I think of Marcus Aurelius, which kind of, because he was a Roman emperor. And I'm like, so I don't really think about the civilization that much, but the influence of Marcus Aurelius upon my life is pretty significant. But it's interesting, because I was like, why? Because this was before the trend ever came. And then this avalanche of people being like, oh gosh, I never really thought about it. Yeah, I think about it every day. And I was like, oh, okay. I generally think about Stoicism. The specific philosophy of Stoicism a lot, but so it's a wild question.
Yeah, it's interesting in the concept of did all these people reincarnate from the Roman Empire as
because
soldiers?
it was a huge empire.
Yeah, so I'm just interested. I'm fascinated by this question. So let me know in the comments, all you folks that think about the Roman Empire often. But with that, thank you guys again. My name is Madison Timmons.
I'm Chris Susi.
And stay spooky, y'all.